Welcome back to the Beyond the Scope podcast presented by ND&D Productions, and today sponsored by TrueLearn. More about them later. I am your host, Andy, senior medical student, very, very close to the end of the medical school journey. And boy, do I have a fantastic conversation in lieu of that kind of timing with someone who is very good at reflecting on the process of medical training, both up to the point that I'm at now as a medical student and very much throughout the remainder of the medical training process as a resident fellow and beyond. So I will say that for the last 48 hours have been a bit of a blur. I was most literally on the other side of the country yesterday, speaking with a wonderful physician and creator. We're back home now. Don't worry, no amount of flight delays or red eyes, accident or not, could have kept me away from today's conversation. And I promise I'll use the phrase sleep deprived for myself today as a general positive feeling. But it's been such a pleasure, as always, as the goal of this channel, as well as this podcast, meeting so many other incredible physicians and creators in healthcare. So I hope your guests today can forgive me. We will definitely be diving into sleep and wellness today. Many of you are already familiar with our wonderful guests' work and her advocacy for student, resident, and physician well-being. But please allow me to welcome to the podcast, Dr. Vater. How are you?
Hi, Andy. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And for those of you who are tuning in, I really did say, Andy, why don't you go take a nap and we can, catch back up later. I know what that feels like to be awake for 36 hours straight and much more. And it's not a good feeling. So I feel for you, Andy. I hope you can rest tonight. And I'm so thrilled that you wanted this conversation to happen so badly enough. You took how many red eyes, but my word, just another reminder how much our bodies need rest and they don't work well without it.
Very much so. I'm afraid that this podcast will be a lot of do as I say, not as I do. But we're going to ignore that. I'm just going to put that little asterisk by the conversation. But definitely for those who are not familiar with your work, can you kind of tell us a little bit about your path to medicine, your specialty, and then kind of how your journey to advocacy and social media began?
Absolutely. So I am a gastrointestinal oncologist. So I take care of adults that have pancreatic cancer, colorectal cancer, liver cancer, and other cancers of the gut. I love the work that I do. Of course, with the work that I do, there are a lot of patients that have really terrible illnesses, and I, in many ways, help them navigate through illness and many times end of life. And I know we're going to maybe talk about some of the hard aspects for us as clinicians, including grief. But my pathway, essentially, I went into public health, kind of national wellness first, and then got a master's in public health, did some global health work, and then ended up in internal medicine because I love taking care of adults, and then into oncology because of my experiences taking care of adults with cancer. And then I never anticipated that I was going to be this person who cared and talked and advocate so much for the wellness of medical students, interns, residents, fellows, and physicians, and really all clinicians. That includes nurses and nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. I didn't anticipate myself being in this role, but I really came to this role of advocate through my own experience. I had a fantastic training experience. I had a huge amount of critical care training in my internal medicine training. I had wonderful clinical medicine training. But as I was showing up online, I had my daughter when I was a fourth-year medical student, right where you are, Andy. You can believe that. I don't know if you have kids, but I gave birth to my daughter when I was beginning in my fourth year. When I started my intern year with a 1-year-old, through my own training, I was doing 28-hour shifts. For those of you who aren't familiar, most residents across the country work 24-hour shifts plus 4 more hours of continuity of care. I worked those as most residents across the country do. I worked 80 hours a week, 60 to 80 hours a week, a lot of my whole residency. And thankfully, my residency program has changed a lot of things since I was a resident. But the reality for most doctors in training across the country is working long shifts, sleep deprivation, and 80 hours a week, and often much more because they're encouraged not to report above 80 hours because they might get an email. Did you make a mistake? Or are you inefficient with your charting? Let's have you do a module. There's all these reasons why doctors work more than 80 hours a week. And we can dive more into that if you want, Andy. But I found myself as a resident and a parent working long hours, sleep deprived. And I found myself in a place where my mental health was declining. Because I know this now, I didn't know it then, but sleep deprivation is an independent risk factor for anxiety, depression, and suicide, right? So just the factor of not getting enough sleep, which we know science tells us 7 to 9 hours of sleep is how much our bodies need to function, for our emotions to be able to show empathy to another human being. We really need that much sleep. And without it, our bodies don't work well, our minds don't work well, our coordination doesn't work well. But for the reality for most doctors in training, and even attending physicians, that term means doctors who are done with their training, their sleep deprivation is part of that. And that's a real problem, not just because it affects the mental health of doctors, it affects patient safety. There's more medical errors when you're sleep deprived. That makes sense. It's like being legally drunk if you've been awake for 24 hours or more. So Andy, you're probably in this like cognitive fog position where your mind's not as sharp. If you were actually to do some physical coordination tests, right, your physical coordination, being sleep deprived in this moment from being jet lagged is not as good. And if you actually did tests looking at the empathy parts of your brain on an MRI, we know that your empathy, your ability to connect with a human being and be in their shoes and take an action to care for them, your levels of empathy would actually be lower in this moment too. So for all of these reasons, my own personal experience, my experience talking to thousands of doctors across the country that this was their norm, it led me to this position of just asking the questions. Why are we still doing this? Is this ethical to sleep-deprived doctors? Is it the right thing to do ethically for patients? And of course, this goes even down further into medical students who are also sleep-deprived. So this is kind of how I got into it and why I continue to talk about this.
And you have an absolutely wonderful talent for writing. And I mean, some of the way I discovered your socials is just how articulate you put some of the negative nuances of medical training, but in a way that really speaks to people who have no idea what's going on. You know, yes, those who are reading it, who are in medical training, are like, yes, you nailed it on the head. But those like family members, friends who are not in medicine, that are looking from the outside in, can also see what you write and go, huh, that was so eloquently put that even I understand it. And there's so many themes that you touched on there. First off, I did not expect to become a case study on this interview, but here we are. Maybe that will drive home the point for sure. And then I'm also reminded, speaking of planes, pilots they're required to not go 24 hours straight, because for the same rationale that they are taking care of many, many people's lives while in the air. What a double standard it is for physicians to also be in a position to be taking care of many, many people's lives, making critical decisions. You take it to the OR, kind of where, my world is too. One decimal place off for your medication, you ain't gonna have a good time. One little shaky hand, scalpel, patient's not gonna have a good time either. Yeah, why are we still allowing this to happen?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. The first part of this is tradition. So doctors were trained in a system that was created more than 100 years ago, actually now 130 years ago, in the late 1800s. Not to fault the physician that created this system of training, but essentially this doctor, Dr. Halstead, unfortunately, through experimenting with anesthetics, developed an addiction to cocaine and then required morphine to fall asleep. And in this setting, the system of hierarchy, where the top doctor or the attending physician was at the top, there were these layers of people in training, which the term became residents because they lived in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
They were expected to work really all the time, 24/7, all year long, live at the hospital, remain unmarried. They received very little to no pay. And then after a long period of time, they were able to then kind of move their way up that hierarchy and be at the top. And part of the reason that, my understanding, the reason that system was created in that way was to help cover up that addiction, to give more responsibility to people in the hierarchy to help with the cocaine and the morphine addiction. And that was a system that was adopted from Germany to the United States. And that became the model for medical education as we know it today. Of course, as time has progressed, there have been changes that have been made. There was the 80-hour work week that was finally created in New York first, and then across the country. I already touched a little bit on the trouble of the 80-hour work week is that it requires that the person who's in training, who's vulnerable, who that's really their only option, they may not have another place to go if they want to practice medicine. It's this place or no place. So if they are reporting 82 hours or 80 or 90 hours, or I know residents that work 110 hours a week, right? I know there are people that have shared with me across the nation, but when you look at their time cards, it's 80 hours on the dot or less because they do not want to be labeled as non-compliant. They don't want to have to go through training to make their efficiency, quote unquote, better. Sometimes they're labeled as you need to be more resilient when in fact they're already highly resilient. And then of course there have been some changes to try to, they minimize the time on call from 36 hours to 24. Now it's 24 plus 4. But if you do home call, so let's say you work all day and you go home and take calls all night, that's acceptable. Most training programs across the country in the fellowships, which is the layer after residency, they do home calls. Sometimes it's 72 hours or plus on the weekend where they're awake straight. Sometimes it's 100 hours or more for the whole week. And so there's a lot of loopholes on how doctors in training can be sleep deprived. And then, of course, when you're in practice, so let's say you're done with residency, you're done with fellowship, if you choose to do subspecialty training, there's no laws in our country about how much call a doctor can take. And if a pilot is mandated to rest before operating an aircraft, a truck driver is mandated to rest for a period of time before driving on the road, but there are not mandates in place for physicians. And that, in my mind, is a huge, huge safety issue for our patients. And can you imagine being a resident or a fellow or even an attending physician being expected by your employer saying you have to work these hours, and then let's say there's a tragic medical error that happens. You will carry that for the rest of your life and maybe even face legal repercussions, right? These are huge stakes for people's lives, both on the end of the clinician and for the patient. And I believe my career goal is to try to make the field of medicine more human, right? How can we put more humanity back into the field of medicine? Not just for patients, because they need that, because patients are feeling the lack of compassion and care, but also for clinicians who are exhausted and burned out and overworked and pushed to the max.
And just an additional history lesson. I forget the exact name, but the 80-hour workweek restriction originated from a fatal medical error.
Libby Zion. Yeah.
And
her father was a huge New York attorney. Through his advocacy and his work, that's how this change came in place.
But, you know, it is interesting that it took that to make this in place. And I have a question down in my show notes where I want to ask you how you believe the state of medical training has changed since you entered it, from when you were a medical student all the way up until now when you are seeing people like me, medical students, going through the process. But, you know, that 80-hour work week restriction, that happened because it affected somebody in power. So imagine all those examples of people who couldn't speak up for themselves, that didn't have the position to take it to a legal battle. How many Libby Zions happened before that was in place.
And I think the tragic thing too is that you don't, as a patient, I've been a patient, right? I've given birth to a child. I've had loved ones who have been ill. And I've also been the clinician who's sleep deprived on the other side of that conversation. And we're both fully human, the clinician and the patient. But patients don't know when their doctors are tired. We don't have regulations to say, oh, I see that you're going to do how many patients have I intubated, right? We've all done this. How many surgeons have been the doctor, the neurosurgeon on call, and this patient has had a tragic spinal injury, and they're the one they've been operating. And my gosh, those people are heroes because they are saving lives. But the really hard thing is, first of all, it's a staffing issue. Do we have enough doctors to cover those spots? Patients can't go without care. But it's much deeper than that too. It's how in the world is that going to be regulated? Right. And so patients often aren't aware of how tired their doctors are. And if you actually self-assess yourself when you're tired, we grossly underestimate how tired we actually are, and we overestimate our skills when we're tired. Right. You're probably feeling that. You're going to feel this.
Oh no, case study part B.
Right. And I think that oftentimes it's easy to villainize if you weren't a clinician and you weren't in this world caring for people as a patient. You think, oh my God, it's easy to villainize this doctor who has, unfortunately, there's been a medical error. And really, it's this doctor that's either mandated to work these hours or there's not someone else to cover, right? And it's a product of the system. And so for both patients and clinicians, for our humanity, we need a better path forward.
Yeah. And you work at an academic institution, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you get to work with residents, fellows, and medical students all the time.
Mm-hmm.
How often are you noticing that level of fatigue with those working with you?
Yeah, I think that when you've been through it, you're more aware of what the signs are, but it can be hard to tell sometimes. I see it all the time, though. I see it all the time. I see it on the faces of the doctors that I pass in the hallway, even if I'm not working with them. I see it with the members on my team because sleep deprivation is pervasive in medical training. You asked a very good question about how has that changed since I finished training. And the truth is that nothing has changed at the national level. But I have seen, just by having conversations and being an advocate, and through conversations, other people are also advocates, and we band together, and we've found ways to have conversations at the program level across the nation. I'm aware of at least 30 programs, probably many, many more, that have made my residency program, for example, eliminated 28-hour calls, right? My fellowship program is working to hire a nocturnal hospitalist or a nocturnist to cover fellows' calls. Opt-out counseling is something new that a lot of programs are adopting. A lot of programs are starting to be aware that people are choosing fields based on their longevity in this career and their health, right? You made that choice, Andy. You made the choice to go into, right? You for many reasons, because it's what you wanted to do, but also thinking long-term about your career, right? Absolutely. And I think that programs are being aware of this, that we need both. We need excellent doctors. We need well-trained, excellent doctors. But the question is, can we do this in a way that still protects their health and their sleep? And many programs are finding creative ways to do that. So I do think that things are changing, momentum is happening, and there's more recognition that sleep deprivation is not only unhelpful for physical health, mental health, emotional health, compassion, but it's not a great tool for learning. When we are tired, our brains are it's like a strainer. It's like you put the needles in, the water flows through. That's what the information does, just gone. So this argument that if you're working all night, you're learning all night, that is false. That has been disproven through data. If you're working all night and you're not sleeping, it's hard to retain much of anything.
Yeah. And so the themes that I've been getting a lot from what you're mentioning as far as what has changed and what can change. Of course, I think you know that I was with Jake when he gave his TED Talk, touching on a lot of the topics that we're talking about right now. But one of the things that he kind of concluded his talk on was actionable change, which is exactly how you address issues. You don't just complain about it. You suggest what are the next steps. And national level is hard to come by for anything. So it seems like it's down to the individual programs, the individual faculty, and even like senior residents to acknowledge and advocate for self-care. And so I'm curious with you, what are some of the ways that you have personally advocated for practical self-care for those training underneath you?
Yep. I think there's kind of two levels here. There is the environment you find yourself in, and then it's the habits that you personally choose to put into your life, right? The huge factor here for most medical students, residents, and fellows and practicing physicians is really the environment you find yourself in. And it really comes down to you have a reasonable amount of work that can get done in a reasonable amount of time, and do you have adequate support, right? Those are really the two things from the environment that you find yourself in as a practicing physician. And part of that adequate work is not work that requires you to work 30 hours straight or 40 hours straight or a week straight, right? So it's advocating for reasonable workloads and adequate support, whether that's support staff or otherwise. I think that's huge. I think that is one of the biggest factors we can do, to advocate for the environment we find ourselves in. And also, as attending physicians, to be the advocates. So our fellows, residents, medical students don't have to do that work, because that's really hard to do in that position, because you're worried about your career. You're worried about how you're going to be viewed. It's courageous of you, Annie, to be talking about all these topics that you talk about, right? I was whispering these things kind of into the abyss. And it wasn't until later on in my residency and my fellowship where I felt like my career was more secured that I could talk about these things more openly. But I was thinking and journaling about them way before that. I think at a personal level, I think that's maybe what you're wanting me to hit on, Andy, a little bit more. At a personal level, right? How do you protect your health? Many of you we know what the wellness sphere is. We know it comes down to a few simple habits. I created a tool called the Smile Scale because I thought, and Andy, you're in this right now, how many mnemonics and memory tools do we have in the field of medicine? Like, this is how you encapsulated bacteria, you memorize this way, and then this is the APGAR score, and then this is right. You have all these tools to remember all this obscure data in medicine. I created a tool for myself called the Smile Scale. It's really a 5-point assessment that really encompasses kind of the data on, I had a background in public health and prevention before all of this, but really encompasses data on healthy habits as well as happiness. So it really comes down to each letter of the word smile is essentially one point. So you can do this with me, Andy, right now. Okay. Sure. So Andy, first question. S, have I had enough sleep in the last 24 hours?
No. Why would you start me off with that question?
What's the first part of Smile Scale? Okay. S. So you're batting 0 out of 5, but that's okay. So we'll say no to the S. And I hate to put you on the spot, Andy, but this is
this is practical application. Viewers, listeners, please follow along as well.
So if you had 7 to 9 hours of sleep in the last 24 hours, give yourself 1 point. Hooray for you. If not, that's a 0, and that's okay. Life happens. Newborns happen. Medical training happens. Jet lag happens. Insomnia happens. But sleep is important for your health, for your short-term health, and also for your risk of diabetes, cancer, heart disease, stroke, you name it. Your health is connected to your sleep. The longer you sleep, the longer you live, right? There's a great book called Why We Sleep. Everyone should read it. It's by Matthew Walker. All the data on sleep, it'll blow your mind. Just read it. It'll help you to be an advocate for sleep and medical training, because people respond to evidence in this field. So if you can know the data and you can present evidence, that's how you move the needle, in my opinion. So sleep. All right, ready for the next one, Andy? Next one. Sure. So fortunately, sleep was not in your realm today. How about the next one, M? So SM for smile, M, move my body. So have I been physically active? Ideally for 30 minutes or more. It's okay if not. Not going to put you on the spot. You can if you want to.
Does running between airport terminals count?
I think we should give it to you. I don't know what your audience thinks, but you can comment down below if you're following along on YouTube. But I would say yes. Okay. Because you can look at how much you actually got, but I'd give it to you. But yeah, physically, sure. That sounds extremely stressful. Okay, so that brings me to my next one. It's about stress reduction. So I, SMI, I is inhale and exhale. Have I found ways to reduce my stress in healthy ways? That might be, for some people, that's meditation or prayer. For some people, that's simple act of mindfulness or deep breathing. Others, that's listening to music, that's walking in nature. But having some type of There's a lot of great TED Talks on stress and stress reduction and why it matters. There's a lot of reasons why stress is terrible for our body, but have we reduced our stress in healthy ways? And I think that, I don't know, what do you think, Andy? Have you had something that's helped reduce your stress? This seems like a very
So
stressful period of time for you.
no, this is perfect actually. Believe it or not. All right, so I managed to get an hour ish nap in one of these like random airport on call rooms that came with like my priority pass. Listen
Hey,
to music, and then believe it or not, I think having these conversations and doing this is also relaxation and a way for me to inhale and exhale. So I would
that's
say
good.
yes.
I used to, I talk openly about this, but when I was in medical school, I developed anxiety, had a test every 3 days, never
Mhm.
had a weekend off. And I started having panic attacks about halfway through my first semester. And I stopped exercising. I stopped sleeping. I stopped basically doing all the things I knew were good for my health. And that's when I came to meditation, because meditation can increase serotonin, and it can also increase what's called the calming neurochemical called GABA. So for
Mhm.
those of you who are listening in, there's a chemical in your brain that helps you to feel at peace, and that's called GABA. And meditation has scientifically been proven to increase that. And so I came to meditation and, started doing all the things again that I knew I needed to do. And it
Mhm.
really kind of reset me, which is really helpful. So make sure that you're taking time to reduce stress. It seems we live in a very fast-paced society. Medicine is just constant interruption. You're getting paged, you're getting called, you're running to a code, you're doing all these things. In this room, you're telling someone that they have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. You walk in the next room, this person's having side effects from chemo. Depends on, you're an anesthesiologist. This surgery's doing great. This person's fine. This person's blood pressure's dropping, right? Things in medicine,
Mhm.
it's not like a desk job. Not that desk jobs aren't hard and have their stress. Going to meeting after meeting after meeting
Mhm.
is exhausting too, but it's a different level of hurriness, especially in training. And we must have ways to slow down for our health, for our well-being. So that's the third one. The fourth one is love and connect. So meaningfully connecting with other people. Ideally, this is your closest 1 to 3 people. So for those of you who are listening, who are those people? Is it a good
Mhm.
friend? Is it a family member? Is it a significant other? Who are those 1 to 3 people in your life who you could rely on if you're in financial distress or emotional distress? Who do you go to? And are you fostering those relationships and meaningfully connecting with them every day? Maybe
Mhm.
that's you're gonna have a phone call or a FaceTime or a date or something or a meal. Maybe it's reconnecting with that person. Maybe it's as simple as, hey, thanks for being there for me. I've kind of been busy and I'm sorry for that and I love you. Just meaningfully building connection into your day is extremely important for your health. The Harvard study of adult development, Andy, have you heard about this?
No, I've
Has anyone
not.
talked about this yet in your world? This is something that
No, I'd love.
so
Come
just,
on.
I mean, I
I
could
want to
talk about
learn.
this for a long time, but the Harvard study of adult development, you should check it out. Basically, they found that loneliness can actually shorten our lifespan by 8 years. So that's that subjective feeling of being alone. You can live alone and not feel lonely. You can be in a marriage and feel lonely, right? So it's that subjective
Mhm.
feeling of being alone. And if you are lonely, it can shorten your lifespan by up to 8 years. And they actually found that close relationships are protective for us as we age. And they help protect our mental health as well. So connection is really important with those significant others, family members, the friends, just those 1 to 3 people. But then also, how do you go about your day, right? Do you connect with if you're an intern, are you connecting with your team? Are you having meaningful interactions with your patients? Are you getting to know them as people? Do you go throughout your life feeling disconnected and not really connecting with people? Or do you talk to the person who makes your coffee? Do you talk to the clerk who's checking out your groceries, right? As you go throughout your day, those social connections are also really helpful for both parties. And then last is really the last part of SMILE is E, or eat to nourish. And that's really, am I putting healthy things in my body? Right. There's a lot of what diet is the best diet and what are the right things to do. And I'm sure that people just, especially on these platforms, just go at it. But what we know is that plants are protective for our health. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, seeds, legumes, right? The more plants you put into your gut, the better your gut microbiome. I'm a colorectal cancer doctor, right? Get a great diverse microbiome and put all sorts of good plants in your body. So when it comes to the smile scale, Andy, ask yourself, have I had at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables today? You don't have to answer it if you don't want to, but that would kind of be like the last part of the smile scale. And no judgment either way. You've been traveling. So
What a wonderful scale. And I mean, I look, I'm all for honesty on my channel and transparency, because that is how we humanize physicians and people in medical training. And I will be the first one to admit I'm 2 for 5 there,
that's
and
it.
it's not great.
Two for
Could
five
I?
smile scale or 2 for 5 vegetable fruits, just to clarify.
Oh, 2 for 5 on the smile scale.
So, and that's
So
okay. I've had days where I am 0 or 1 for 5. And I found that on those days, I feel my physical and mental health is just, but the days that I'm 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 5, I feel.
so that it just comes to show. I mean, I will say it is somewhat circumstantial, but in other ways, things that I very much need to work on. That's, you know, ooh, I was about to say something that is incorrect. I was about to say that's what fourth year is for, when I know the truth is I shouldn't have waited until fourth year to try to hit many of those. And that's very much something that we will talk about after the quick break. But I definitely want to leave it here for us to grab a sip of water, and for the viewers and listeners to maybe mull over the smile scale in their own lives for just a moment. But we will be right back after this short little break. I've said before numerous times on this channel, and I still stand by it, practice tests and practice questions are by far the most efficient and powerful way to prepare for your standardized exams, something medical training has a disappointingly large amount of. But in order to lighten the load and help you excel on your tests, I am proud to partner with TrueLearn, the sponsor of this episode. TrueLearn is a data-driven test prep resource with a 100% pass rate, trusted by top institutions such as Stanford, Mayo Clinic, Harvard, and much more. Their smart banks with questions written by content experts give you the tools to succeed on your crucial board exams. As a medical student, they offer prep for COMLEX 1 through 3, USMLE 1 and 2 CK, and the USMLE and COMAT shelf exams. But it doesn't stop there. You have the same attention to detail and world-class practice test questions for PA, dental hygiene, MA, NP, nursing, OT, PT, speech therapy, pharmacy, and pharm tech licensing exams. Yep, all of them. For my residents, which I guess I will be soon, you also have resources for all your in-training exams, such as the ABA Basic for anesthesia, ABSITE for surgery, ABEM for EM, and much more. I've been using some of their smart banks to prepare for the away rotations I had, and I've been really blown away by their performance analytics, real-time national benchmarking, and thorough explanations that help me to learn the most from even my most facepalm-inducing incorrect answers. With thousands of questions for each exam, you will be sure to have all the knowledge to knock your exams out of the park. If you would like to try TrueLearn, use code NDMD25 for $25 off your first subscription. Again, that's code NDMD25 for $25 off TrueLearn's incredible smart banks. Happy studying, no matter what exam you're studying for and when you end up tuning into this episode. Best of luck to all those preparing for those exams as you watch and listen to the podcast. And of course, thank you so much to TrueLearn for your support on this podcast and the channel. All right, so I want to return back with kind of a question, almost a challenge to you. And it's a question of probably stubbornness on my end, but it's one that I think a lot of medical students share. Whenever we go through rough patches and times where it seems like we can't rest and things get so busy, you're grinding for whatever your next goal is. The first response from those who care about us is, why don't you just take a break? Why don't you just rest a little bit? And my initial response was, I can't. I haven't earned it yet. I'll rest when I finish this exam. I'll rest when this rotation's over. I'll rest when I submit this application, but until then, I can't. And there's this notion in medical training that in order to rest, you have to work for it. You have to get it, or else it doesn't feel right. So, what is your rebuttal to that? Say you were my attending, and you were like, "Why
Well,
don't you just take a break?" And I'm like, "I can't. I have an exam. I have a shelf to finish. I can't rest."
first, I would say that I've absolutely been in your shoes. And I know what that feels like. I just have to push a little harder for my step one. I just have to push a little harder for my internal medicine boards. I just have to keep gritting through to finish. I just finished a novel in October, and I took my board
Congratulations.
for oncology in November. And I feel you. Gosh, I feel you. I am you, right? We are so, in medicine, we are trained to achieve. Boom, get the grade, be the top student. Boom, do ace the MCAT, get into medical school, match into the top residency, match into fellowship, get the best job, pass your boards. I mean, we are trained to achieve. And then as soon as that's done, okay, what's the next benchmark? Where am I going to achieve next? Oh, starting a podcast, giving talks, going to do, right? Know that this is part of our psychology. And this is not only what we're jumping into this world that is very fast-paced and achievement-focused, and validation comes from external markers of success. But know that many of us learn these habits and they're validated throughout our lives. But I would challenge you that when you are not at least sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night. 9 sounds like a crazy number for most people in medicine. Okay, let's say 7 hours a night. If you are not sleeping 7 hours a night, you are not retaining the level of information that you could retain. You're actually going to be more successful. So let's actually turn it around a little bit. It's not just rest. Not rest is not lazy. Rest is not unproductive. Rest, when it comes especially to sleep, is productive because it's where in your hippocampus and other parts of your brain, those short-term memories become long-term memories, goes from the short-term to the prefrontal cortex, right? So sleep can be seen as productive, right? Study and then take a nap because you're going to retain that information. Study and then go to sleep, right? So just talking about sleep. Sleep can be productive for a healthy career in learning and taking tests and retaining information. So just put that in your mind that when you're actually forcing yourself to work on 6 hours or 5 hours or 4 hours, if you're going on little sleep, you're actually going to perform worse, right? So sleep as a performance metric. First of all, that can help us because of the way our minds are wired. The second part of this is also exercise. Can also increase your learning, right? The brain derived growth factor, BDNF. Someone can correct me if I'm not saying it right, but it increases when you exercise, and that also assists with learning, right? So both sleep and exercise are productive in terms of us retaining more information. So if you really want to ace that test or get that shelf or pass your boards, right, sleep is going to be a healthy part of that, and exercise is a healthy part of that. But let's just talk about other types of rest. Rest, letting my mind go for a walk and just being out in nature, taking a weekend off, going out to dinner with friends. Maybe it's just sitting in silence. Maybe it's watching a movie. Whatever that rest looks like to you, it may feel so hard. Well, if I just spent that time putting another thing on my resume and then I need to do all this other stuff, right? But in order to be our best selves, we really, really have to focus on our health. And I learned this the hard way because I'm sure we all feel this way. You can feel yourself when you are running on empty and you're at the end of your rope. Are you the best version of yourself? Are you going to be the best person to go in and tell a patient that they have cancer? Are you going to be the most compassionate person to be at home with your child, to your loved ones, right? Instead of saying, what can I achieve? And I just have to get there. It's how do I show up every day and live my life in the here and now? Because it's so easy to have this mindset in medical training. Well, okay, I'm a medical student now, but just when I'm a resident, I'm going to be so happy and I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to have the long coat and people are going to be, right? And then when you're a resident, it's the same thing. When I am attending, right? I tell you what, as an attending physician, the same thing happens. It's always a moving, it's a false promise of I will be happy when, or I will rest when, or I will relax then. But to not take care of our health in the here and now, we're not only affecting how we feel, our mental and physical health, but we're also affecting our ability to have long, healthy, happy lives. I mean, we deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
We deserve the health that we strive so hard to give to others. I mean, we deserve that. In the here and now, we're people too, we're human beings. And the dichotomy and the paradox of that is that we're actually going to be better at doing this work when we have sleep, when we have been physically active, if we have the ability to do that, and also to allow space in our days. I heard a really good analogy. When you light a fire, right, you have the wood and then you have the spaces in between. And the spaces in between are what allows for the air to flow and for the fire to be present. And if you snuff out the air or the spaces in between, you snuff out the fire. So what does that look like for you? How do you build the spaces in between? What does that air look like? Doesn't mean you're taking 3 weeks off, and would that be great, right? 3 weeks off and traveling, although we know traveling is often can be really exhausting, can be fulfilling, but exhausting too, right? But what does that look like on a 10-minute lunch break? Does that mean going to the rooftop garden and just not being beeped at and not hearing all the alarms? Does it mean driving home with some music that fills your soul, or in silence? Does it mean 10 minutes of journaling? Doesn't have to be another thing on your list that you feel like you should do. Maybe it's therapy. I do virtual therapy once a month. I think everyone in healthcare should do that. What is it? Is it walking in nature? Is it doing nothing at all, staring at a bare wall? What does that air look like for each person? And it's not about, just remember that we feel like if we are not doing it, that someone else is, and we're competing with all of these other people, and that if I just do this, then I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to be here, and then I'm going to be happy. But allow yourself to do the things that are going to make you learn better, but also the things that are going to give your life air.
Yeah. And so I have 2 points that I want to bring up. One of which will be a potentially controversial question. First one being, I think everybody has their moment in medical training, whether that be med school, residency, fellowship, even attending wise, where they realize that they cannot, that this notion of time spent away from studies or getting better at my craft is like just going to crush any progress that I've made. And I think for me, it was the step dedicated period. I hammered this home a lot, and it has since changed at our medical school because of my class's feedback, where the curriculum changed, where we were marathoning step 1, step 2, and all of our shelves back to back to back in a 3-month period after we finished up our core clerkships. And at that time, I was flip-flopping between anesthesia and orthopedics, and the best course of action between those specialties, and a good advice for anyone pursuing a competitive specialty is just shoot for the stars. And what was it, aim for the moon, or if you miss, you'll land amongst the stars, something like that. And so that was a heavy pressure that I placed on myself. And I was bouncing a lot, as far as studying, as far as this, personal romantic relationships at the time. And that period where I felt like I could never earn rest until it was over drove so much of what made me well away and out of my life. And I will not disclose my step 2 score, but I will say it was very good. It was enough for me to feel good applying orthopedics if I wanted to. At the end of that process, it was this feeling of I climbed the mountain and kicked everybody and everything else down to get there. And I was like, yes, I got it. And I turned back around, and all I saw was scorched earth. I saw all the damage that kind of mentality did to me and the people around me, people that I very, very much cared about. And that was like the moment where I said, you know what, I can't I can't continue like this. I don't want this to be the rest of my career. I don't want this to be the rest of my life. Um, and you know, I wonder, where does that notion come from, where you have to wait until it's all over to take care of yourself. Um, and part of me wants to explain it with, well, isn't that a little bit of how we got here, right? That's that high achieving energy, that hyper type A personality that got us, 4.0 college, got us into medical school. And like there will be a point that's gonna run dry. Like I swear to everybody, I would trade 10 points off my step 2 score to do so many things differently during that time. And my second point, here comes controversy. Listening to a lot of your experience, being like, oh, it'll get better once I hit this step. It'll get better once I hear it. Even for me, I was like, oh, I'll get my life back together when like dedicated is over. And it just time and time again has proven not to be true. Is delayed gratification a myth? And I mean that in all seriousness.
Yeah. So part of being a human being is always thinking that the next thing is going to bring happiness. Oh, you see it on TV all the time. Well, if I just had that car, oh, if I just had this house, if I just had that job. It's not just in medicine. It's pervasive throughout all humanity. The trouble is that our brains adjust very quickly to a new norm. It's called the hedonic treadmill, if you've ever heard it called that way. And then there's another goal. And then there's another goal. And then there's another goal, right? And so the myth is that we will be happy when, right? The science of happiness really, really is about presence in the moment and gratitude, right? The happiest people on earth, and when they look at this, are people who find joy exactly where they are. And while it is true that a certain level of wealth or security, up to $75,000, that's what the studies tell us, provides a level of happiness. Beyond that, even adjusting for cities that are, it's probably higher now, maybe up to 100,000, but even for inflation and all of this, right? There's this myth of, oh, if I had this prestige, and if these people finally respected me, and if I reached these goals and I had this stuff, and it's all a lie. And I think the hard thing is when people get to these places and they find, I'm an attending physician and I have my dream job and I'm doing all these things, but why am I not happy? Right? It's because happiness does not come from that. We think in our society, it comes from this external validation and from this stuff. And the truth is that living a simple life and being present and being grateful for the things that we have and being deeply connected to the human beings in our life and slowing down and embracing peace and joy for the things and the people all around us. And if you're a person of faith, right, gratitude in that way, that is what leads to happiness. And that's what the science tells us. It's not about external validation. And I think it's true in medical training because we see it, because we have to. If I just hold on, otherwise, if I don't have that light at the end of the tunnel, how in the world am I going to survive today, right? But the more and more that we can say that light is there, and I'm going to have more control, and I'm going to have the say over my schedule and the career that I'm doing and the thing that I'm doing every day. That is a beautiful thing to have that low level of control when you're done with training. To say, I want to work this many days a week, and my other days, like today, I am not in clinic today. I have clinic 3 days a week. I do inpatient work 4 times a year. I work 3 or 4 weekends a year. Those are the times I'm on call. Otherwise, I'm not on call. I work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 3 days a week. I'm in academic medicine, so today's like today. I do meetings, I do academic stuff, I teach, I get to talk with cool people like you, Andy, right? That's wonderful to have that control, but I think the more that we can embrace, and it's hard to say that, of okay, well, connections with people are what matter, and gratitude with what I have is what matters. It's easy to say that as a person that has enough to eat and has a roof over my head and has a car to drive and has an education, right? Poverty is something that we need to continue to talk about. But if most of us, at least that are maybe have a computer or a phone and we're listening to this and we're in medicine, we're not dealing with poverty, right? And so it really comes down to joy and happiness is not going to come at the end of that. It's going to come when we embrace the connections in our life and the presence with other people and the gratitude and the slowing down. And anything else is a myth. And so how, with what we have, and I've been in those moments of gritting my teeth and studying every day for 12 hours for step one and then step two and boards. I get that. We all need an endpoint, but the more that we can build that into our day-to-day life, that we're not going to reach the end and say it was all a lie.
Yeah. And I mean, just to wrap this little segment up with a nice bow, it's always like people are always worth it. Those connections are always going to be worth it. Because the test is always going to be there. The studying is always going to be there. But those connections, those conversations, the people in your life that are caring about you, as hard as it is in those moments, let them in.
Well said.
And, you know, I say that in hindsight, very, very much so.
Yeah.
And I think this last little bit, I want to touch on some of your unique qualities that has given you so much insight into this. I think particularly, I was telling Paul Tran, who I just flew in from Phoenix to interview and work with. I was telling him, it's like, oh, you have such a powerful role in advocacy. And I think it's partially because of your specialty. People are more willing to believe you and take your word to heart because you see terminal illness daily. Like that's your job. And so what are some of the lessons that your time in, you know, oncology has surprisingly taught you and shaped the way that you advocate for wellness, not just for students and residents, but just people?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Andy. I truly feel a lot of people say, medicine isn't worth it. Gosh, would you ever do this field again? I love my job. That may seem funny to hear for those of you who aren't in medicine, but I love my job taking care of patients with cancers of the gut, pancreatic cancer, my patients with colorectal cancer. Many of my patients are in their 30s, their early 40s, some of them in their 20s. Taking care of patients, and many, I would say, oh my goodness, what percentage? I would say a good amount of my patients have metastatic cancer, right? So these are cancers that most of the time we cannot cure. And I am helping them navigate through the season of diagnosis and upheaval of their lives, treatment, and then end of life. Sometimes that's years-long process. Sometimes that's only a couple months. And so I get to see these people every 2 or 3 weeks, often for years. And I love the work that I get to do. It's so meaningful. People say, it's so hard. I can never do that. I love the work that I do because of the connections. I think the very first lesson is at the end of people's lives, it doesn't matter what career they had. It doesn't matter how much money they made. It doesn't matter the things that they achieved. What matters is their relationships and the people in their lives who they are spending those moments with. People often say to me, I wish I had spent less time at the office. I wish I had spent more time with my children when they were young. Wish I'd spent more time with my grandchildren, right? So I think the first lesson is human connection is what matters. Not that those things are important, not that you can't. I derive a lot of meaning and value from the work that I do. It provides for my family, but it's really about those connections. I think the other piece is holding on, right? A lot of people talk about things that they held on to, things that happened to them, things that they can't forgive for a very long time, like resentment that they hold down deep. I don't know for any of those of you who are listening, is there something that you're holding on to that is just eating away at you. And I think many of my patients describe to me they wish they would have let that go a long time ago, right? So is there a forgiveness piece here? But they also wish that they had embraced who they really were, right? So often, Andy, I don't know if you face this, but you're a medical student, so you probably do, right? How many of us in our field have wonderful people, mentors, family members, friends, right? And they all have ideas of who we are and how we should spend our time. I write fiction. I write narrative medicine. I've written a novel. I love writing. I'm also an oncologist. I'm also a mother. Right? So I do these things that are kind of odd, right? I don't do a lot of research anymore, even though I love research. It's important. My peers do it. It's wonderful. I enroll patients in clinical trials, but I am no longer writing the grants and doing the phase 1 or phase 2 clinical trials. I love that work, but I recognize that if I did that, I cannot do all these other things that I want to do, right? So many of my patients at the end of their lives say, I wish that I had embraced who I was and what mattered to me. And I wasn't as worried about what did this person think and what did this person want me to do and what did this person think of me. But truly, what did I feel was what were the gifts that I had? What was the calling for my life? What were the things that brought my heart alive? Maybe it's like what you're doing, Andy. You're doing something very unusual for a medical student, right? Investing all this time into this passion project. And there's so many people that will go down a path. They'll say, well, this is who I am because this is the path that other people have defined for me. But I think maybe the last thing I can hit home is it's taken me a long time to figure this out. I didn't even tell my own mentor about the smile scale or this novel I'd been writing for 7 years or any of this other stuff because I felt like it was like not good enough. And my mentor was just like, that is the coolest thing. Like you built these social platforms and you're giving these talks and you're doing this smile scale thing and you're writing. Like I don't fit in a box. I don't fit in a box like a lot of my peers do in academic medicine. And I have finally reached a point where I'm okay with that. Other people may not understand me, they may not get me, but like these are the things that make me come alive. It's advocating for students and advocating for the health of doctors and advocating for humanism in medicine and writing. Like those are the things that are going to be my career. And it feels freeing to be able to step into those things. And so I just want to encourage any of you who are listening to say, it may take years. Who am I and what makes my heart come alive? And how can I step fully into those things?
I have nothing else to top that. I have nothing else other than this has been one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded of this podcast. I don't know whether it's the sleep deprivation that is, making this so impactful for me personally, but I hope that the advice and the lessons, the experiences shared over this conversation is really touching on those watching and listening right now at whatever stage of training they're in, or if they're supporting somebody in training, or if you're not even in medicine at all. First off, thanks for watching. but second of all, these are lessons that are uniquely human. And I tell people all the time that thing I love about medicine, it is at the end of the day a human field, and it connects us all. So Dr. Vater, thank you so much for your time and for joining me to share your stories. Again, for those watching and listening, where can they find some of your writing and advocacy work?
Well, thank you, Andy, for inviting me. It's truly been an honor to be here with you. I have a website, first last name doclauravater.com. It's where you can find more about the smile scale and connect with me on socials. I'm on Instagram, is probably where I'm show up the most, but I'm on most platforms, and it's just Laura Vater. So I'd love to connect with you if some way that we can connect and you're doing similar work. I'd love to chat.
And all those will be in the description below. Find it there. But I want to be respectful of your time and your day off of clinical duties. So thank you so much, Dr. Vater.
Thanks, Andy. About to take my daughter to piano. So jumping into mom duties, but it's been an honor. I just wish you all the best as you just celebrate and then you transition into intern year. I'm just really thrilled for you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Are you gonna put stuff? Oh.